Thanks, Simon. Everybody hear me all right? Yeah, that looks all pretty good. Hands up. That's great. Hey, welcome everybody, and great to be back at the showgrounds again after our 2-year break. And you could just sense there was a great vibe out there yesterday. Everybody's been champing at the bit to sort of get back into our normal routines, and you know, particularly given the where the industry currently is at this juncture, with great opportunities and but also some challenges as well. So there's been a lot for people to talk about. And of course, a lot of those topics are going to be covered here today amongst this great program that the Droughtmaster Society's managed to put together. So it is a big program, so I'm going to be pretty conscious of keeping on time and on budget. So, but we'd like to just make sure you have every opportunity for questions. So don't be shy, and make sure you throw your hands up if there's something you'd like to interrogate our speakers on. Just a little bit of housekeeping first. The bathrooms are out the front door and to my right. Lunch will be served out in the paddock bar out to our right, as will the drinks this afternoon, sponsored very kindly by Tim. So I think that's it for housekeeping. Oh, just on the questions, I have bought a bit of an incentive. That's a copy of our Cattle Baron board game. That's going to the best question of the day. So, I know you're a competitive bunch, so get in there, and I'll be making notes about the best questions we hear during the day. So I thought I'd just give you a very quick little insight. We produced that Cattle Baron board game for Rocky in Beef 2018, and in order to get it done, we had to get it printed in China, of course, because these things are all very expensive to print in Australia. So we had to print 50,000 of those for the first print run of the board game, little plastic cows. Now, they are actually modelled on Droughtmasters, and that's a true story, because we had to be ecumenical. We didn't want giant humps. We didn't want flatbacks. We wanted something in the middle. So Droughtmasters was the choice. To construct these little plastic cows, we hooked up with two what they call 3D modelers in China, and their job was to produce a rendition of an animal that looked reasonably realistic. There were two main problems. The first one was neither of them spoke English. The second one was neither of them had ever seen a cow in their life. So we had a huge problem. We would have sent 150 photos of Droughtmasters up there, from the front, from the back, from on top, underneath, every angle you could possibly think of. But they came up with a rendition ultimately that we think was pretty good. So there's your breed sitting there in every cattle barn. There's now 200,000 of those little cows floating around Australia somewhere. So it's been an interesting exercise. So look, let's get on with today's program anyway. We've got it's a great program. We're going to have to keep to time, so we will be keeping a pretty close eye on the clock. But plenty of opportunity for questions there. We've allowed question time right through the program. So let's get into it. Our first session, and we'll ask Blair and Mick to join us on the stage here, is a panel session. So we're going to be just talking about some of the topical issues in the industry, the opportunities that lie ahead. So if Mick and Blair would like to join us on the stage. We do have an apology. Charlie Hawkins was originally going to be speaking in this segment. Unfortunately, Charlie's come down with COVID. So I'm sure, given the vast experience of both Mick and Blair through chain, from production through to processing, we've got plenty of opportunity to cover the points that we'd like to talk about. So firstly, just a very brief introduction. You people know these speakers in most cases better than I do, so they're going to be the most brief of introductions for our speakers. To my extreme right, we have Blair Angus from Angus Pastoral Company and Signature Beef. Of course, Blair has a strong connection through chain these days, with following the launch of Signature Beef processing plant at Moranbah last year. And he's deeply embedded with branded beef programs and targeting specific high-value markets overseas with his product, and is obviously well connected with the Droughtmaster breed. So you'll all be familiar with Blair. And next to him, of course, is Mick Hewitt from Hewitt Cattle Company, or these days is more Hewitt Cattle and Sheep Company because of the diversification into other species. Similarly, Mick's business has diversified and expanded and targeted specific niches, including organics. This whole move, it's probably a theme that's going to come through today, is getting out of this commodity beef space into specialisation in one form or another, and there's a lot of it going on in various forms. So, welcome both the gentlemen for today's program. So, Blair, let's start with you. How do you see the lay of the land, just generally in the beef industry, the challenges, where things are, the current state of play in the industry? What's your take on it?
Thanks, John, and good morning, everybody. Look, we've had a fantastic, probably 18 months to 2 years. Usually there's one segment of the industry that's benefiting and one that's losing, but we've actually seen a perfect situation where everyone's going quite well, and there's been certainly some extreme circumstances in the world that should have probably affected us adversely, but that hasn't been the case. And I suppose, in short, I mean, it can't stay this good for that long. But in saying that, as an industry as a whole, we've I suppose moved away in some aspects of my company anyway, I suppose, and some of the smaller groups. And it's good to hear Mick wants to get into some service processing, because we do provide that. But actually looking at the consumer and focusing on that. So we still need the big guys, we still need the commodity product, but there's a bigger focus now. And one of the things from COVID was people started to cook again. The domestic market has been phenomenal. And unfortunately, Russia has caused a problem with containers around the world. So there's a lot more beef on the domestic market, which at the moment is being absorbed. But I think we need to work, probably we have to focus on some of those things that are not just beef, not rain, not cattle supply. We actually have to look at the broader scale. We need to make sure that the people that are making decisions for us know that we're informed, and we need to actually just put our opinion forward on those things. And potentially, that's our biggest threats at the moment. A simple thing like containers. We can't get containers. I was just speaking to Mick. You know, the production, one of the production managers at Casino, he's desperate for containers right now. If we can't get containers, we don't have export. Our free trade agreements that we say, they're not worth a penny if we can't ship product there. And it's all that sort of stuff at the moment. That's probably our biggest threat, but we are in a very good situation at the moment.
Before we come through to Mick, do you want to make a brief reference to your take on the FMD situation? I mean, we certainly don't want to focus unnecessarily heavily on FMD today, but what's your take on the current position, the impact it's likely to have on the Australian market?
I personally just always look at it from a trade opportunity. I was quite surprised to find that we were importing some pork fluff from China. Seriously, we shouldn't. That product should not have entered Australia. That's where we will get it, through products rather than tourists. Indonesia's had, I think, foot and mouth for 25 years. It hasn't made it as far as Bali before. They're vaccinating. Hopefully that stays contained. And I don't feel that will be the way it will enter Australia. But if a product like the pork fluff that Channel 7 found in Melbourne got fed to a pig somewhere, we're in a lot of trouble. Yeah. So we need to be advocates and talk to our politicians about tightening up that side of thing. We like to work in this world as the guys that play by all the rules. We're talking about a country like China that has this disease. It's rampant. Swine flu is rampant, and we're bringing in a product that could compromise our whole beef industry. We need to just let our politicians know, shut the door on that. And I feel they might be a little blasé, but we need to take this as an opportunity to actually lobby for that.
Yep. Yep. All right, Mick, let's just interested in your sort of opening sort of gambit, if you like. You know, it's a very complex supply and demand market we're dealing with. Probably never more complex in history, given issues like the massive drought in the United States and what that means in terms of production out of that country in coming years. I mean, what's your take on where things currently sit for the Australian beef industry?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks to the Droughtmaster breed and everyone for inviting me here today to speak. Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah, I mean, it's complex would be the word I'd use. It's been, my last probably 5 to 8 years have been quite insightful and a massive learning curve for me from where I started in terms of, I sort of did it reverse-wise in terms of starting on the production end or livestock production end of the business now, working right through the industry and with the way our business is designed today, fully integrated, that we've recently taken over the Arcadian Organic Natural Meat Company as part of our business. So that's how I come to sort of get a very good visibility across the supply chain. I think actually probably my initial observation is the industry has an obligation across in each side, in each segment, whether it be manufacturing, processing, livestock production, to really understand all the facets of that industry. And I still think there's probably a lack of knowledge there across the board. If I still remember my grandfather telling me about, he basically used to have to duke it out with the buyer at his yards when he mustered his bullocks in about what weight they were going to weigh, and it sort of like sold on a per head basis, depending on who was the best negotiator on the day, really. And now we're moved to a point where we're measuring product, our grading systems, the integrity around the way that we actually track and track our livestock through the meat products. But I also see an evolution in the industry. I have the luxury, I'm actually off to the US again tomorrow. I get to go into retailers over there on the ground. And it's fascinating for me to look at the way we consume red meat now versus how we used to consume red meat. It's fast evolving, and I think that anyone that thinks that it isn't needs to be very aware of it. And that's ranging from the concept of someone picking up a large piece of red meat and taking it home to consume it over a number of days. That's going to rapidly change if it hasn't already. There's a lot of technology now in manufacturing, particularly value enhancing, value adding, that is adding huge value back upstream to all of suppliers, right back to the farm level. So that's cooked products, creating convenience for customers on that end, but still demanding volume, consistency, and quality, really. So I think we've done a lot across the industry from farm to plate. If we really give ourselves some credit, I think often, I suppose what I'm leading to is I think the industry, in all different segments of the industry, historically used to separate very much to Blair's comments originally, used to be very individual in their approach. And if we just look at the landscape of the Australian beef industry, particularly at the moment, but I see it across our lamb operations and our pork operations, the actual change of approach is absolutely critical, but it also has happened a lot in the last, I would say in the last 5 years in particular, but particularly in the last 10 years. And that, if you read anything about, there's actually a recent event and talk about the Fortune 500 companies, if you look at their success, the most successful of those are the ones that collaborate. There's actually a genuine deep study being done on that by the likes of Harvard Business School that show that collaboration is the name of the game. And for the Droughtmaster breeders in the room, collaboration is obviously what you do. You're creating a genetic system to provide to your broader customer base. And I think when you talk from genetics right through to whether it be packaging, moving the industry from plastic packaging to recycled packaging, improving shelf life as a result. How do we actually portion control products? How do we now cook products to give it longer shelf life for better utilisation of the carcass? All of these sorts of things. So it's quite a, I just can't emphasise enough. My interpretation of the Australian red meat industry is that it's a highly complex environment that has a huge amount of opportunity in it, and where people play within that in that environment is actually everyone has a really critical step to play. But the more understanding we have across the supply chain, which is what we're seeing, and that collaboration piece is demonstrated by, specialised programs, whether it be our organic program, but you've got, you can name 20 of them off the cusp, whether it be Wagyu, specialised Wagyu or Angus programs or composite bred programs, these sorts of things that actually are targeting specialised markets. That goes to Blair's point and your opening comments, which is decommoditising the product and actually driving greater value for the industry. And that is going to be a hugely powerful thing. Well, it is a hugely powerful thing, and I think, yes, we've had some macro factors that have really driven the recent outcome, increase in the value of our product at the farm gate, but be under no illusions, all of that work that gets done behind the scenes has really driven and created that extra level of value.
Thanks, Mick. Some excellent thoughts there to sort of process. My first question to both of you is that, given that you've made this transition from historical cattle production into vertical integration, in Blair's case through lot feeding and processing, and through your own case, Mick, through targeting organics and things. Has your emphasis changed in terms genetically, cattle management wise? Now that you're vertically integrated, has your emphasis in terms of the type of beast and how it performs changed as a result of vertically integrating? Would you like to go first, Blair?
Thanks, John. I suppose for me it was different, and you knew my father, John. He basically, every decision he made was focused on the consumer. He was a butcher by trade. So I suppose I came from that angle to start with, where we were breeding. He always said you can only breed a beast you want to eat yourself, and that's what we've always done. We were then faced with the weight and grade system here in Australia, which didn't really give us a bonus for that. So 24 years ago, we embarked on doing our own beef. And look, it's when you say that we're fully integrated, I think we're a long way from that yet. You know, there's so many opportunities just in this little thing that we're doing at the moment. And it's not just about the beef, it's about the biofertilisers we're going to make. It's about the way that the whole beef industry is being approached, and Ian will be talking here shortly. But you know, we as producers have been doing a lot of things that our consumers absolutely love for a long time. And I suppose for me, I didn't change anything. I actually just found a niche for what my father was doing before me as well. And that is a story that is extremely powerful. When we travel to Europe, probably more when the Europeans come to visit us and come to the property and eat the beef, see the whole story, you've got a customer for life. So I suppose it's a niche that we had to find the people that wanted that, and that's the way we've approached that, I suppose. So we didn't go out to change so much what we're doing. Every day we change. Every day I learn something. If I waste a day and I don't learn something, I'm disappointed. But in saying that, I think we need to embrace what we have done before, because there's a lot of stuff there that our consumers, and at the end of the day, that's the only place new money comes into the system, is at the consumer, whether they want to pay this much or this much. That's the only part that the money pool of the beef industry can expand. So we've got to be focused on them.
What about you, Mick?
Yeah, maybe put it to me a different way, John, again.
Well,
Sorry, mate,
I
I confused you.
what you were saying. I just was so interested.
So fundamentally, I was asking whether your approach in terms of genetics and management and other interventions has changed as a result of moving from production, specifically production, into vertical integration.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, no, yeah, I think just listening to Blair was interesting, because I actually just listening to Blair, realising I totally agree with what Blair's saying. We don't consider, it's very simple to say, oh, we're a fully integrated business. We are an integrated business. There is so many different, and so I was sort of interested in your interpretation of that, Blair, and it is exactly right. If you're producing and you're delivering direct to customer, we have a very unique prospect in our business, in that we are fully customer facing. We're servicing 1,600 retail outlets in Australia every day of the week alone, packed out of our own facility, retail pack product, and then we face into other export markets as well. So we have very, very direct contact with customers, with the actual consumer rather. Does it change the way we do things? Absolutely. I mean, we've made significant investment in genetics over many, many years, and many in this room would obviously have had contact with my family in the days when we were doing seed stock production. But I would say we have had a different journey, so it's maybe of interest to the group, to everyone here. Blair's been from a family that's progressively integrated that way. We've obviously have a capital partner in our investors, and so very early in the piece I sort of realised that it's very important to have a strategy in anyone's business. And it became very clear to me that there was a emerging trend, and this is sort of 8 or 9 years ago, in the sustainability and better for you, for the environment space. So that was why we approached organics. And so that's what led to us ultimately becoming integrated. I mean, I couldn't sit here and say that it was, I was clever enough to put the whole thing together, to be perfectly honest. I just kind of, I suppose I identified areas that required investment at significant scale that were otherwise restricted through a lack of access to capital. And I had a passion and interest, and as did Ben, my brother, in running high quality livestock in a sustainable production system. So I would probably say we've adjusted our management techniques to suit our integrated supply chain and our customer demand. That would be my response. And so as a result of that, we've progressively plugged different parts of the supply chain together to create a very unique supply chain now. But we still have plenty of segments within that supply chain that we still subcontract. So we have something, I think we have something, there's plus 10 subcontracting contractors in Australia that help us deliver our product to customer. But yes, overall the answer is yes, certainly across the board. For example, a good example, and it's happy to be very frank about it. One of the challenges with the organic industry, in my view, is if you put your business on a value stick and you say what's the greatest value drivers and lowest value drivers, one of the greatest value drivers for any business selling food quality is obviously integrity of the product, but also eating quality. And by way of where the industry in organics evolved from, it was a lower threshold. You could basically sell, there's certain organic producers, honestly, I could sell them a wallaby and they'd eat it. Like they are that committed to that cause. But that is not an acceptable long-term proposition for us. So we are very focused at the moment in investing in the eating quality side of the business. So that comes from livestock genetics, but it goes through grading systems and our packaging programs, even through our cold storage and cold chains management systems. So they're all important in how we think about the supply chain, definitely.
All right. Well, we've sort of moved into the sustainability space now. So let's just spend a little bit of time drilling into brand attributes, provenance, where brand identity in the beef industry is likely to go. I mean, you've mentioned meat quality, and through Mick Crowley and the MSA team's great work, you'd like to think we've solved a lot of the problems and the issues, the inconsistency with meat tenderness. And I think, to be fair, a lot of the early brand programs, it was all about how tender the product was, and that was about it. What's happened over time is that these brand programs have embraced a whole lot of other things, whether it be animal welfare, sustainability, methane abatement, traceability. I mean, there's a whole lot of other attributes which are starting to emerge now. So interested in both of your thoughts on where the current situation for brands are. Breed affiliation is another one, of course, that some breeds are obviously clearly drilling into, and maybe there's opportunity for others. But firstly, with you, Blair, your thoughts on where the whole brand movement is going, and you have your signature brands are a classic example. I caught up with Blair in Cologne, of all places, in 2019, and
Before COVID.
before COVID, and there was Blair's stand there. I don't mind sharing this little insight with you. Amongst about 40,000 food manufacturers and providers from around the world, it was the most incredible food industry trade event I have ever seen. And the key message that shone out from Blair's site through videos was the custodianship of the land, the way, the care and attention that's paid to managing the cattle at a very personal and committed level. And anybody wandering past Blair's stand from all parts of the world were just riveted by these scenes of you and your kids, pushing a bunch of cattle along a creek. And, it was a great image. The image itself sold your brand incredibly well. So anyway, I've sort of drifted off target a bit there, but what do you think about those sort of where brands are going and where the future lies in that space?
Thanks for that, John. I'll get a bit emotional now, but yeah, basically we've as a family have told that story since we first started doing our branded beef, and that was through people coming to us and saying, wow, what have you done? I said, well, this is what we do. and basically just convey the story of what we do. I believe brand integrity, which Mick mentioned, is the most important thing. That is, if you tell a consumer or a customer that this is what you do and that is found to be wrong, that's detrimental to the whole beef industry, not just your brand. And I believe that the integrity part is something that it upsets me on a daily basis. I won't mention any names, but one of our major packers in this country have used 2 of my brands, which I've had for nearly 20 years, and now one a name, one a label. Even my home is on one of their labels, where they've plagiarised our brands because they've piggybacked off our story. That's an unfortunate thing, and my pockets aren't deep enough to go and challenge that. But where it comes into it, you've talked about whether it's sustainability, or whatever we want to put on it. We should never underestimate what we already do. I believe that in some instances, when another level is put into the branding of a product, it actually denigrates a lot of the other products. There's the assumption then, oh, well, that one, if it doesn't have a sustainable tick from this society, then therefore it's not sustainable. And we've got to be very careful of that.
There's some brands out there with terms like ethically treated and humanely treated.
Exactly.
What about everybody else's beef? Is it inhumanely treated?
And that's exactly what happens, and that's the unfortunate part. When we get onto these bandwagons, you're denigrating from the other ones. I suppose we're fortunate. We're small enough that our products have ended up in many interesting places around the world, and that's because we've always made our story. Look, our new abattoir, the value adding room where we'll do all of our high value cuts. It's got 4 massive windows. It looks out. There's the feedlot. There's the hay paddock. There's the dams. Anyone that comes there, they're not going to ask me if what's my thought on plastic packaging, which I wish they would, because I believe we have a massive opportunity there as well. But first and foremost, the story tells itself, and we have to convey that story to us. We've lost a connect with the city. You see it here with the Ekka. I was speaking to some people yesterday. They said, but the Ekka hasn't started yet, and it's on the news as the agricultural show, and that's it. It's all over for the cattle people today, but we're continually being disconnected from the city. So any chance you get to have your children's parents, children's friends' parents come and visit you, take it up and just show them the story, because we're losing that. And if you do that at the grassroots level, it's a good level to do it. Trust me, it works. But, sorry, I've digressed a lot there, John. We've got to be very mindful of, if we want to put a layer of why ours is best, and Josie and I we always said right from the start, we are not going to say our brand's the best. We've always just said this is the best we can do, and it'll be the same next time. And that will sell far more product than saying, actually, mine's better than that one over there because of this. Because all you're doing is lowering the bar over here so you can hop over it. We actually want to be lifting the bar everywhere, and that helps us all.
So, Mick, what are your thoughts on that in that sort of space? You want the question again?
No. It's good. Probably, I'm not sure what I can add to what Blair said there. That's value. I think I'd actually had a look at it recently. Mick's over there, he'll probably correct me, but I think the average human needs about 30 grams of protein a day to survive.
I'd be dead with that.
Now, 30 grams actually translates into about 100 grams of red meat. So, in a nutshell, I think if you backsolve it from an actual pure protein perspective, a human needs about 60 kilos of protein a year to actually survive. But that's pure protein, so that's significantly more animal protein to actually survive. So, the demand and requirement for protein, what I'm getting at is there is different segments within the actual consumer base that actually demand different things and can afford different things, and we should be under no illusion that that is not the case, to Blair's point. As I say, we have a very unique customer base in the organic consumer, and we can see it because we do beef, lamb, pork. our pork production is a free-range production system, so it's a high claims, free-range APIC certified solution. That is a very interesting study into the sustainability question and how we actually think about sustainability and how we present it. That is not as sticky as one would think when times get tough. So you've got quite a lot of price elasticity there when it comes to actually market demand versus willingness to stick with the price versus an organic consumer, as I say. I can go into some stores and ask what uptake's like, and the store manager will say, "Mate, just sells the same as it does every other week," because it is very much a unique customer base that actually has that. But to Blair's point, and I reckon it's a great way of looking at Blair's come up with there, which is we can only produce the best we can produce. And one of my frustrations, if we're going to air a frustration each, I suppose you got to go on one as well, is the actual, we live in the world of rigorous certification. I mean, I don't believe there's another business in Australia that actually can offer multi-protein solutions to customers with the highest third-party claims available in the world. We do organically certified GAP Step 4, which is the world's probably most stringent animal welfare program at Step 4 level in the world from an actual animal welfare certification process. To Blair's point, yes, there's some checks and balances, some adjustments in the way we do that production system, but ultimately there's still a lot of people doing the equivalent production system, but we certify that from a third-party verification perspective. And one of my big bugbears is the fact that we're constantly being, if you like, battling against other brands or products that go into the market that are actually not third-party verified. So that's the classic tick on the NVD, and I've done X. And so one of our big things is how do we communicate that? So we can be, there's two ways to look at that. We can go, okay, well, stuff all those other buggers who are sort of, making half-baked claims, and we're doing all the trouble and we've got high integrity. But or the other side is just say that's everyone else's, that's their problem. What we've got to do is actually be really good at communicating that work we do, which is, there's all of those things we do. There's about 5 standards, which again, as a suite of offers, we've been a carbon neutral product as a whole. There's others who'll claim to be the first carbon neutral beef in the world or whatever else. There is no question that the Hewitt Arcadian supply chain was the first fully integrated Arcadian carbon neutral supply chain in the world that we could find, because we offset every single thing. So my point there is we've been doing all these things, but we've got to be better at communicating. And my number one message to all of you guys is the more we do in terms, we've got to be so aware of how we're perceived across as an industry through to the customer, because it is bloody hard to tell that story. We spend millions on it every year now. We have a whole sales and marketing team, about 14 people in that team, and of them there's about half of them are in market hearing. And to penetrate the market with that knowledge and that insights about how we produce, what the production standard is, etc., and how to get the consumer to uptake and actually understand, because the world's full of so much messaging these days, right? It comes to Blair's talking about packaging. There's a massive challenge, you ought to go look in store and look at what I call is the progressive denuding of the actual meat case. Even as recent, probably 3 years ago, Blair, you could go into a meat case in any Coles or Woolworths in Australia and they would be full of an array of brands and brand types. It's the major's strategy to actually move away from that, to actually move to a private label structure. But that then makes it even harder for the actual individual initiatives, whether it be Signature Beef or Cleaver's Organic for us, to tell our story, because you've got a small pack pace. They say the average customer only spends, you get them for maximum 9 seconds. So how do you communicate all of that information in 9 seconds and hope they pick your product up, and then understand all the work you've done? Because I say it, and probably the final point I make on it is I say it all the time to the now legion of people who work across our business. If we are, and I say it mainly to our sales team, if you're not selling well and the marketing team, you're not marketing and explaining the story well, you're doing the bloke who's digging a post hole in 48-degree heat in Alice Springs, or the bloke in a freezer at minus 20 degrees at Gosford at our factory, you are letting him down, because he's put so much work into that product and we're not actually communicating it correctly.
A couple of, just while you're drilling into the organic space a little bit, firstly a clarification. is your carbon neutral claim on the made on the basis of buying credits, or is it through production system changes? Have you entered into one of the agreements with one of the aggregators, or how does that work?
So, yeah, a bit dangerous. You get me started on this, John, I'll get really wound up.
Give us a 30-second summary.
Summary is we achieved carbon neutrality through offsetting, which I'm not a fan of, but it's important to understand that there's a certain amount of methods available to the Australian livestock industry. Those methods give us angles with which to inset. There's only two ways to manage carbon. I've got, forgive me for those, but I think I've got pretty good at actually explaining it in as simple manner as possible because I've had to perfect that art. Really, in a lot of ways, there's only two ways to manage carbon. There's abatement or sequestration. In simple terms, either stop emitting it or extract it from the atmosphere and store it somewhere. The Australian agri-industry is in a very precarious position, in my view, because we need to make sure the policymakers have got our back in terms of preserving our right to actually be a large solution to that actual conundrum, which is to make sure that we have the legislation in place to recognise the carbon sequestration capability we have through our soils and our natural resources. So water also sequesters carbon, soils, and then storage, trees, etc., etc. Abatement obviously occurs through better genetic pools which accelerate growth rates, conversion rates of animals, etc., etc. So we are a combination of what we call offsetting and insetting now, and we are rapidly moving towards the objective to be at least 50% insetted within 3 years. So and that is so we have done a full life cycle assessment across all of our beef, lamb, and pork operations and all of our factory, including logistics, shipping, etc., to customer. And it's very interesting when you start getting. I'm actually been very engaged in it for a long time. It was one of my initiatives that I took to the Arcadian board to actually originally do the carbon neutrality piece. And interestingly, it had mixed uptake. We had certain customers who actually dropped contracts with others and came to us. We had other customers who said, "Oh, that's nice." And then we had other customers who said, "Oh, we don't really think it'll resonate with our consumers," so they didn't pick it up and use it.
So one more quick one.
Could I just add a bit there? Because as you know, I'm a very simple man. Our business is very simple. It was a long time ago that I went to school, but one thing they did teach me there is that matter cannot be created or destroyed. Another thing I learned in biology is that the trees die without the carbon. Now, it's been portrayed as this poison of the planet, and it's not. It's actually, it sustains more life than oxygen. And there's a lot of people out there, the voters, that are, we have politicians that want to save the populace. And it's an unfortunate thing because we're being portrayed incorrectly. You're exactly right about sequestering carbon in the soil or the water. But the way I see that, I actually don't produce beef, I grow grass. And if I don't have healthy soil, I don't have carbon in it. So I'm actually just wanting to make my soil healthier so I can do a better outcome. And that story doesn't get told, but that simple story is what you've just said in a complex way. But matter cannot be created or destroyed. That's a phenomenon that they can never change.
That is a fact.
Yeah.
That's actually a fact. There is no more or less carbon in the world.
That's right.
What we've done is we've released carbon into the atmosphere through the way we've actually industrialised, mankind has industrialised society, primarily through burning coal.
That's
and
correct.
Burning petroleum. So we are now being tasked with, frankly, so they get the 13 or 14% that beef production or livestock produces of the total emissions annually. It's actually the cycle of eating your wonderful grass and then resolving it. We just need to actually work out, we're not going to change that in my view. I totally agree with you, Blair, but we've got to work out how, we've got to make sure we preserve our ability to be the answer because it will be a powerful thing.
And for us, the answer is that natural carbon cycle is what we participate in. But unfortunately, the billions of people in the world that don't understand that, when you see a billboard, I think it was in, I've forgotten the name of that, Gillard's time. There were billboards came out with cars driving down roads and trees wilting. Well, it's exactly the opposite. the carbon is what the tree exists on. And unfortunately, we've got a general populace that aren't informed enough about that. But too much information, or a little bit of information, has caused this rod for our back, I believe. But we need to be proactive in telling that story and what we do and how we participate in that natural carbon cycle as well. Yeah. But I take my hat off to you for what you're doing, because there is a demand for that there. But like you said, I'm a little bit too simple for that.
I think that's the point. But I'll make about different consumer segments too, Blair. Like, there's certain segments who frankly want to eat your very high quality finished product in a food service setting, and things like that. We have a customer who actually is demanding a set of production claims so they can feel they're more of a feel good about eating in the product versus actually the eating experience 100%. Per se. If I can actually bring our eating experience up, which we are rapidly, then we will actually be better placed.
Oh yeah.
And that's the interesting part about it. So I do acknowledge that. I think overall carbon management has been one of the most hijacked subjects. And guys, I live in Brisbane for my sins, and I can tell you now there's nothing more offensive than being lectured by a vegan with a leather belt. So, it is what it is. You just got to work with it.
So, Mick, I don't want to focus unduly on organic, but, you do represent a very interesting niche and a very high value niche, let's face it. One question, how do I put this? Is it still acceptable for organic production systems to offer a lower eating quality than conventional beef because of the challenges you face in that space? That's the first question. And number two is given the powerful messaging associated with the word organic generally in the marketplace, should or is the organic movement moving to a situation where sustainable, regenerative, methane reduced, carbon neutral becomes, is that something that the organic space is going to have to embrace as a given, rather than something additional to simply a claim about no chemical contamination?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, no, I don't.
You don't get the board game though.
No. Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
That's called Indian giving, John. No, the answer is it's actually fundamentally no to the question of just because we're organic, can we accept deliver a lower quality eating quality? No, we cannot, and we do not. In defence of the industry these days, when I talk about the quality, the problem is humans are a really interesting creature, right? Like, they've got the longest memory. Bloody hell, I tell you. It's like deal with my mother to start with. They've got very long memories, but the reality is.
No comment.
The Australian organic industry was a cottage industry, and fundamentally, therefore, they would be producing on something on such a low scale originally, probably 20 years ago. When you combine the amount of people who had an interest in it, is why we see the supply and demand factors at play. From an actual cigar or compounded annual growth, organic over the last 20 years has grown at something like, I don't think it's topped out less than 13% per year. So the growth of it has been huge, now off a very small base. Problem is, when it started as a cottage industry well before my time, you were ending up with pretty average quality product. Problem is, a lot of consumers were scarred by that. Yeah. And I think we're evolving away from that very quickly now. Like, we're killing 330 kilogram bodies today. That'll be dressing out as good as any Japox steer that you would have seen. We were killing cows last week doing 405 dead. Those cows, they're grading through really well. These cattle, they get put in and we chill and age them for an appropriate amount of time. They'll eat as well as any product you'll get now. So it's just we've got to grade it better so we don't let some of that
we'll have to
stuff.
Have a cook-off.
Yeah, no, you definitely still give me another couple of years. But yeah, that's certainly the answer to that, John. Right. I'd say that we don't have. But then to the second part of the question, which is, can we just be organic? Absolutely not. Two reasons for that. Number one is that I'm a businessman, and keeping the barrier to entry high to my competitors is very important. And that's why I still do say that we operate a third-party verified set of production claims which are second to none in the world. That gives us a very, very powerful marketing message. But by nature of our customer base, they want to have all of these other matters dealt with and managed, and the confidence that they're eating not only an organic piece of meat, but that that animal was raised under very, very closely guarded animal welfare production systems, without chemical, whilst also grazing on land that was subject to a regenerative agricultural production standard. Again, to Blair's point, much of this has already been done. We're simply verifying it so we've got product integrity.
Okay. Good. Look, sorry, Blair, go on.
Just on something that Mick said there. I look at the wine industry and I think about it. There's an assumption there that everyone wants the same piece of meat, and that is so wrong. You know, some of us drink Shiraz, some of us drink Pinot Noir, whatever. I believe that if I go to Dan Murphy's and I see a bottle and it's got a Henschke label on it, that's going to be good. I believe that beef should be looked at that way. You will have customers that won't want to eat my steak. It's as simple as that. And that's the way it should be, because diversity and correctly labelling that brand, the integrity in that brand and what you are delivering to that person, it's what they want. As they spend less money on sustaining themselves, whether it's you know, the income that people use now just to sustain themselves is, I think it's probably only about 10% in Australia. If you go back 50 years, it was 40 to 50%. So it was probably more a one-size-fits-all. Now we have a very discerning consumer, and they want variety. It's as simple as that. So it's not a matter of comparing Mick's to mine, even though I suggested the cook-off.
I'm quietly avoiding that.
No. But it's one of those things. There are, and like you've identified, you've got customers that want your product. Yep. They won't want my product. But, and mainly because I'm not telling that whole story, but it's horses for courses, and we can't forget that. We've got to, that's the beauty of the beef industry. You know, I know we're at the Droughtmaster conference, but when people come out and say, this breed is the best breed, well, it might be for you. But it's actually, you know, like what we look for in our breeding program, and it's our own unique breed, is a silhouette. It's actually not a breed component. It's a silhouette. It's got this shaped hip. It's got this textured hair. It's got this, and this. My customers don't want to know all that information, but it's the best for our environment and what we do and what we're putting up. And I suppose that's what we have to get away from. We have to realise that there are different people that want different things, and we need to acknowledge that. None of us are right, and none of us are wrong.
Good point, good point. All right, look, we've got plenty of time left, so I think we'll, let's get some questions from the floor. I mean, we've covered an awful lot of topics here already this morning, so Simon, are we going to use a roving mic, or how would you like to do this? Sorry, Ali's got one here. So if you wait, put your hand up, wait for the mic. If you could identify yourself, and then if you have one or particular panellist you'd like to respond, if you could ask them. So who's got a question for us? Remember, there's a board game in play here, so down the back here.
That's good, it's your side.
Yes, Steve. We've heard a lot today from you fellas about, you know, the consumer end, the brand marketing and all the rest of it. Reality is, I guess, across the broader industry, for the majority of it, it's really a commodity that we're producing. But through your experience, through the entire integrated part of the industry, and through your experience in the northern industry, where is it that you still see the lowest fruit on the tree for the broad scale of the industry? You know, where are we going to make big inroads in the industry in the next 10 years, specifically more so for the broad industry rather than the individual at your level?
I think that was at you, Mick. Yeah, I'm not sure. But.
So, yeah, I guess you're talking in terms of opportunities to drive value right through the business industry. I think I touched on it earlier, Steve, is that the way we actually market and sell red meat, I think, is where the really big future lies. I was in in a manufacturing plant in the US a few months ago. And this is how clever it's getting. They were producing hot pot pockets. So one of the issues we're having globally now is to actually get our product consumed quickly and at scale. You've got, like we go to an airport, the reason why you're having trouble in airports is can't get enough people to run the joint. Same for food service, QSRs, quick service restaurants, whatever they are. We've got to produce and have ways to actually deliver protein in a convenient format to actually sell. Thank you, Blair, that's it. So definitely the whole technology around pre-cooked products is going to be a massive transition in my view for the global meat market, which is good because it actually can apply across a lot of different components of the carcass. And that remains the single biggest challenge for our industry. We essentially grow this animal all year from genetic selection, which you guys are really in pointy end of the industry there, through to actually getting product on a plate for consumers. There's a hell of a lot of stuff that happens in between that. But the really perverse thing about our industry is we actually grow this thing right up, and then we euthanize it and we cut it into about 100 pieces. So we deconstruct it, then we've got to reconstruct it, then we've got to distribute it. So that's the really big place I see a change coming. Not a change, an evolution is probably the way I'd put it, mate. So I think genetic selection, grading systems, sophisticated supply chains are actually improving, ever improving, but that one will be hopefully create more opportunities. So, sorry, my quick story on the hot pot. So they were essentially massive sous vide lines doing little 200-gram hot pot pre-cooked pockets, and they would simply go into New York restaurants and they would plate that up, and they would simply heat that in hot water, pop it open, put it on the plate, and plate it up with two nice pieces of vegetable, and that would be a la carte, mid-range restaurant offer. They never cooked it in store. That's going to be a rapid access to actually more consumers for us.
Blair, what about
I think I'll probably take it back to more grassroots. We look at the current price of cattle properties. Basically, I look at the fact: are we fully utilising what we have? And when I use the word utilising, be careful of that. Some people think that means having your paddock look like this carpet. That's not what I mean. It's actually, are we doing the best job there so that we can, all the simple things we know about preg testing, et cetera, et cetera. We know all of that stuff. But we have to actually just keep vigilant on all of that as a producer level to get the most we can. I think what Meg has said, I actually went to a few processing plants in America, and the last one was the biggest one, and I nearly thought about becoming vegetarian for the rest of my trip in America, but the seafood was good, so that was okay. But certainly that bigger manufacturing sector, by gee, if they shone the torch on that, that would be very detrimental to people eating beef. So we do have to look at those guys, and there are bigger guys that are doing the right thing. We have to make sure that they maintain their integrity. They need to, it's not just truth in labelling. It's about, the levels, you're talking about your levels of auditing. With the processing part now, we're finding a whole new level of auditing. And, if there is a hair left on a carcass, we're going to fail. Yet I can go and buy a duck and it's still got half the organs and feathers on it. Why are we a different level to another protein? And I know I'm digressing there, Steve, but it's about competing in that same space. That duck is looking at the same person to add money to this bubble. So I suppose, in short, we've got to be careful of that. I 100% agree that making food more convenient is the way to go. It's not always that solution because, one thing that I put to our customers is that actually slow cooking takes less time. Switch it on before you leave and come home and it's ready. It's perception, and we've got to be careful we don't slip into a perception that we are, competing against the Chinese manufacturing product. We are a small country. We do a great product with a lot of variety, and we need to capitalise on that, I think.
Well said. Yeah. Just a couple of quick points to Mick's point about the opportunity with value adding going forward. You know, one of the challenges I see in this, and it's possibly something for Mick's crew in the trade access area back at MLA, Andrew McCallum and others, and that is the colossal variations in tariffs on value added products versus chilled or frozen meat in a box. If you look at some of the figures, it's completely prohibitive to be producing a value added product in Australia to sell into Korea or other markets, because the tariffs they whack on it are so high, it de-incentivises that to do that in Australia. Talking about value-added products, I was at a Kilcoy Global Foods function last week as a send-off to Ian King, and they served a piece of short rib, intercostal meat from between the ribs. Probably the most memorable piece of meat I've eaten in 5 years. Fully pre-cooked, value-added, in a bag where it's taken out of the bag in the restaurant in New York, slapped on a searing hot plate for 2 minutes just to give it a bit of a crispy edge. Absolutely magnificent piece of meat. And you know, there's opportunities there.
Staple in
there you go.
Blair's got
one on the screen in front of it.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not a steak. It's a piece of meat which is probably has lesser value, but is being elevated up the ranks enormously just through a process.
Understand.
Yeah, in the factory. Anyway, so let's get some more questions going. Throw those hands up. Rob, do you want to go next?
Rob Atkinson. I'm just interested in what these two guys had to say about carbon, and a lot of us are sick of hearing about carbon, but when we moved to South East Queensland 4 years ago, I did a 3-day course, RCS course, and Andrew Zerner was our consultant, and I knew nothing about carbon, probably still no bugger all, but I go back to your comment, Blair, about we're grass producers, and I wanted to become a grass producer because we'd had our ass kicked pretty bad around Hewitt since 2012, and
if it gets to rain out there, that's the trouble.
Anyway, I learnt more in that 3 days, and I'm 60 years old, and I've been in this game all my life, than I have in my entire life. It's something that I'm not trying to preach it because I don't know what I'm preaching, but growing grass and the story of carbon is very interesting. And not only is it interesting because you can grow more grass, you can also hold more moisture in your soils if you've got good sequestration, and I didn't know any of that stuff. You know, you can hold huge amounts of moisture in your soil if you sequester carbon, and the biggest amount of sequestration happens with grass, not trees. And it happens when grass is in stage 2 of growth, not so much stage 1, whether that's burnt feed or shortly grazed feed. It's got to be green really to sequester. But when there's a bit more solar panel area, meaning leaf surface, at stage 2, that's the perfect sequestration stage. Once it gets to stage 3 and the grass has gone brown and it hasn't got any life in it, it can't sequester anything. But, it's a good story for the beef industry, but it's also a good story for producers. I don't know how you bring that back to a breed society. I can see where Mick and Blair running big operations and selling a branded product can really hammer home that message, because that's what you guys are putting into your business. But as a society, I just think we need to know more about sequestration and tell that story, because it is a benefit to each and every one of us to have to look after our environment, obviously, and I just thought that 3 days was 3 days well spent.
Thanks, Rob. I don't know, would you guys like to make, it's more of a statement, but would you like to make a comment?
I'll say with that, Rob, it's for me, it shone light on what my father did before me. And I think we actually have to be careful that when we go to the 3-day course, we actually take on board what we were taught before. It certainly, when I actually went to it when Stan Parsons ran it, and the main thing I got out of it was to go and buy a ring and ask a girl to marry me. But that's worked out quite well. But certainly it shed a lot of light.
What do you mean quite?
Most days. It shed a light on what my father did before me, and I believe that we stepped too quickly into saying, oh, geez, we all have to go and do this. We need to actually work out what we are doing right and make sure we put that story forward. I certainly don't think that we should ignore doing things better. We should, but don't forget we're doing a lot of stuff right already. Yeah.
Mick, do you have something to add?
Oh, I think just, sort of, I guess, coming towards the end of time, I think it's an interesting comment by Rob. I just reiterate my earliest comments, which is collaboration has been one of my secrets to success in business. And I think as a breed society, I mean, the Hewitt family have been advocates of the Droughtmaster breed for many, many years. Well, actually proved up more than anything else that we gave away bloody growing Herefords, which was fully ingrained in the family DNA for the previous 50 years, to actually take up the production of Droughtmaster cattle, because we saw their adaptability and their capability to actually adapt between, at that stage for us, various climates within which we operated. And they've continued to be an important part of our business because they actually deliver that adaptability, but actually performance in the various landscapes. My point being, but when it comes to carbon, is I'm very encouraged to hear you say that, Rob. If I'll be brutally honest, and that's why I don't do many of these speaking things, because sometimes I get myself in trouble, but, the agricultural industry has a notorious track record of being very reclusive in terms of, and not wanting to adopt and move with the way that the world is dragging them. And sometimes you mightn't be dragged. It's probably a bit like your wife, I suspect, Blair. Sometimes you don't want to be doing something, but you've actually got to do it.
I don't understand what you mean there, mate.
My point's made, and my point is, I guess, is I think sometimes we need to be careful what we resist, and I think if we can more approach things in a collaborative manner, I can assure you that will generate prosperity and opportunities for you and your children and the generations to come. And there's a proven science. 1% extra carbon level in your soil is the equivalent of receiving 4 inches more rain per year. That's a fact. That's a scientific fact. And I think if you combine some of the new production systems that aren't wildly different to the way we currently do business, with great cattle and great management skills, there's opportunities there. That's my summary.
Gentlemen, some great insights there. Really appreciate your input this morning. We have reached time, and we want to make sure Ian gets his fair quota. So we thank you for your participation. Would you like to put your hands together for Mick and Angela? Okay, so we're going to rattle right on, but we've got Ian McConnel speaking before we break for morning tea. So Ian will be well known to many of you, of course. Mount Brisbane at Esk, one of the flagship Droughtmaster breeders here in southeast Queensland, and fond memories of spending long periods of time at shows and things with the McConnel family and carcass competitions going back. So Ian, of course, previously was World Wildlife Fund and is now working with the US processor Tyson Foods, and has a very interesting remit in this in the whole sustainability and environmental space. So would you like to give us your presentation, Ian, and then we'll get some questions at the end. Thank you.
Would you like to use this one? Yeah, I'll just use this one if you don't. I'll throw my... Actually, I wrote some notes, which is a rarity. It is great to be back in a Droughtmaster room. It's been a while. A lot of friendly faces. Well, I think they're friendly. I tell people you're friendly around the room. And congratulations on 60 years as a society. It's been a society I've been involved in most of my life. Both my parents are life members of the Droughtmaster Society. I think I got drunk for the first time showing Droughtmasters here at the Ekka. So it's been a lot of fun. We are Mount Brisbane Droughtmaster stud, but I've been working in the corporate space now for almost 10 years. I spent 10 years as an extension officer as John said, I joined the World Wildlife Fund, which took some convincing to make Mum understand that move. And then 2 years ago, joined Tyson Foods. So my role with Tyson Foods is to lead our sustainability initiatives in everything outside the US. So we operate in 140 countries, so that leaves 139 under my remit, which is a little bit of a challenge. But as a company, Tyson's not very well known here in Australia. So to give you an idea of the scale, we process around 155,000 head of cattle a week, around 850,000 pigs. The number of 47 million chickens is the one that always gets me. If every animal goes to heaven, there's certainly a superhighway above some of those plants. We also process around 35,000 tonne of food processing products into the food service sector around the world, and a lot of that is in Asia. So since 2018, we've owned a significant business purchasing what was Keystone and BRF facilities throughout Asia Pacific, and we're sort of building a plant every couple of months in China currently. It is a fascinating organisation because not only do I get to work there, but they allow me to work as part of an organisation called the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, of which I'm the president. And I've been involved in the Global Roundtable now for 11 years and it started in 2012. And collectively, the GRSB represents around 80% of all the beef that's produced and traded around the world through our membership. So we have a membership at a global level, and then we have 13 national roundtables that sit under that. And the Australian Beef Sustainability Framework here in Australia is one of those such national roundtables. And I want to talk a little bit specifically around what drives us as Tyson around some of the sustainability initiatives, but where also we see ourselves as a company moving, and bring it back to your point, Steve, about what that means for you as producers. And there's a couple of sides of the coin that I want to talk about that. One is very much the space that Mick and Blair spoke about, and we as a company do have product lines that we sell into supermarkets under Tyson brand. Especially in places like Walmart, Costco, and a whole range of Asian supermarkets, and increasingly Europe. But we also operate in the commodity space. So here in Australia, we own a processing plant at Kaminya, so across the road from Duncan, you'll hear from later, where we move around 100 tonne of beef a day into burger patties. Around 90% of that is for McDonald's. So we buy a little bit of every cow in Australia, is the easiest way to say that. So while there are initiatives we have in place to move claims to a consumer, carbon neutral, never ever claims, organics in our system, what we need is industry scale change so that that commodity product for us maintains a place in the marketplace. Where we're seeing that hit the road really strong is in Europe. So Europe is the only market in the world where we're seeing a decline in meat production. And it's generally due to consumer preferences around health and sustainability. It's not a cost issue. You know, Europe is not a poor part of the world. It is generally the perception of the product. Now, some of the forums I don't want to say lucky because there's two sides of that coin too, but I get to sit around things like the climate COP discussions with IPCC and the United Nations. I get to sit at the food system summits. And there is very much a discussion around what a sustainable plate of food looks like. And we're having to work very hard to make beef maintain its place in a sustainable plate, in a sustainable diet. But I'll put it to you bluntly, not all beef can be on that plate. And that's the truth. The challenge is what beef can be, and when do consumers have access to information to decide which beef they put on their plate. Because there is beef produced all around the world, here in Australia, Latin America, Asia, that would not meet the criteria that any of us would call sustainable beef. There's also products that are being sold with claims that are not true. I've stood in a plant in, I won't name the company, but in northern China, where I saw Simmental bulls coming out of a Chinese feedlot, and then literally 2 hours later being pre-packaged into pre-cooked Australian beef steaks out the other end. So there are claims that aren't helping consumers make that choice as well. So I do want to touch on your point, Steve, about what does the normal industry need to do? And the way I'll get to the answering that question is explaining where we need to be as a company and why we need to be there. So we have a target to reduce our carbon footprint by 30% by 2030. That's called a science-based target. So it's done through the Science Based Target Initiative. So a whole range of scientists sit around a room, and we as companies and most of the big companies around the world in the consumer goods space have done this, have gone in and said, we're going to set, we want a climate goal. This is all the data about our business. How much have we got to improve our footprint to get the globe to the 2-degree future? And next year we'll move it back to a 1.5-degree future. And for us, that's 30%. We need to be 30% better. But we've also committed to being neutral by 2050. Now, you'll know as members of the Australian beef industry, you're going to be neutral by 2030. So as we head to 2030 and we're going to have to reduce our footprint, there's a fair good chance we're going to come knocking here to find that beef that helps us reduce our footprint. And a lot of companies are going to. If, and it's the big if the numbers coming from your farms, are numbers we can use to report, so are they accounted for in the way that follows the international rules? And a lot of work, we're in constant contact with the CN30 team at MLA to help make sure those international frameworks are being met. But the point I put to you is that by 2030, you'll probably need to know your number, your carbon number, because we're going to have to be paying for it, and we'd rather be paying you dollars per kilo for carbon than we would competing with Shell, Exxon and others for buying carbon in a market separate to our beef. The fancy term for that is insetting. We want to buy the carbon off you as farmers when we buy your beef, rather than buying beef here and carbon here. We don't want to start playing in a separate market. New Zealand did that. So New Zealand has a policy in place where every beef producer needs to know their carbon footprint by the end of this year. That's in law. Now, it was interesting, I was in New Zealand on Tuesday, and a lady from the Bank of New Zealand said, please understand how amazing a position that's going to put us in as a country. We as a finance sector will automatically be able to report across all our portfolio of where our footprint is. And internationally, that'll make New Zealand by far and away one of the most popular places for agricultural investments. If every farmer, it won't just be leading farmers like Mick who know the number that can get investment, but every farmer will have access to ethical investment under that scheme. And investment is one of the key things that drive us. We heard a lot about consumers, but right now, access to finance is by far our biggest driver for sustainability. We have not only ethical investors and our shareholders telling us, you need to be good so I feel good about giving you my money, but we have companies buying our shares to get votes at our board table to then ensure that we set and meet targets. And that's happening all around the world. Those ethical investors are driving. The good thing about that is that's pushing us in a position where we're actually going to meet consumer trends. So I don't think the consumer trends will be any different, but by working with those shareholders, we're getting ourselves to a position where we're becoming a more trusted brand in the consumer space as well. Our challenge is finding our ability to communicate that to a consumer. We need to be able to bring a claim from you as a producer through to a consumer, and it's difficult. We have a traceability system in Australia, and it's really good if we get a disease outbreak, we're going to find out where those animals are. But as yet, that traceability system does not enable me to tell anything about what you do to a consumer. And I think it should be enabled to do that. I think if we can ask MLA and the Integrity Services Company to look into anything, and Blair was spot on, there is so much you're already doing we need to be able to tell. But we've just done a big piece of consumer research in the US, and the consumer is starting to fall out of favour with sustainable, with holistic. They know what the challenges are and they want specifics. It's why organic still remains a very strong claim, because it's exactly what it says on the label. No chemicals in this food. We're looking into what we call some of our new sustainable products, and by far and away the highest willingness to pay in our consumer space, because our new largest consumer is the millennial, is a carbon claim. They know what the world's biggest problem is. It's decarbonising our economy. They want to make choices that support that. So they want a specific claim around carbon. That's the one, number one indicator of what they'll pay more for. Okay, what we didn't ask them is where's the cost-benefit analysis around some of the other things around quality, etc. Now, we've committed to not having any decreases in quality or any of those other attributes, safety around it, but it'll be interesting to see as we go to market whether or not they're ready to. Especially in the US, because the US eat 80% of their beef as ground beef or further processed beef. Okay, so, but you'll see over there a luxury burger. I love the idea of a luxury burger because there's no such thing as tough mince, but they do want attributes in burgers as much as they do steaks. And that, you see grilled healthy burgers, they're no healthier than McDonald's, but people are buying into burgers as a luxury product, and especially in the US. So that finance sector has helped us set targets. Those targets has helped us remain relevant in the consumer and help build trust. But it is the collaboration that's becoming more and more important for us. And it works two ways for us because we're in the middle. You don't see Tyson brands much at the consumer end, and that's deliberate. By far our biggest collaboration is with our customers. So we make sure our targets at least meet or are better than our customers. So if you're thinking of Walmart, McDonald's, some of those bigger companies, we have to meet their requirements first so that they come to us and buy at scale. But then we want to be able to also make sure working that way we collaborate with the producer to come through. Now that's a slightly different way of working than it has been in the past. Producers now have to be a partner for us in this processing journey to get beef to a consumer. Now there's a challenge for us if I look at our Australian business, but also our strategy where we do have direct relationships in the US isn't to set up Tyson branded certification verification systems. The challenge with that is if you as a producer invest in it, then you're kind of tied to us. And it might seem nice to us, but in actual fact, it becomes a limitation. What we need is industry scale systems that help bring through some of those verified claims. So when I say to you, know your number, be able to tell your story, we need an industry system that allows you to put that number, ideally on an NVD. Ideally, it's something that we can look at and buy cattle and add value to certain things depending on what our customers require. There's projects at MLA trying to do that, the Verifying Beef Credentials project under the Smart Farms grant, projects like that are looking at helping to find ways where we can, in a more simple way, allow every producer to tell their information to us as a processor so that we can value it. Because it's going to have to happen at commodity scale if we're going to grow the pie. We as a company will always try and grow our slice of the pie, but we need to work to make sure that whole pie, beef demand globally, needs to stay high. And one of the initiatives that I am very proud to be part of, as I said, is the GRSB. What the GRSB does is brings together the world's best minds from right across the beef value chain. So we've got processors, retailers, producers. We've got all the input companies, so finance, animal health. We've got academia, so a lot of universities. In some parts of the world, we involve government. In some parts of the world, government kept at arm's length, depending on the relationships. In some parts of the world, like Colombia, the roundtable was set up to write government policy. But that unique platform, the other group is NGOs, and that unique platform allows us access to places like COP. So later this year, I'll be in Egypt at the climate COP, trying to find a way to demonstrate that beef can be part of that sustainable diet. So there is a food day for the first time at Climate COP this year, where the very discussion of what belongs on a plate as a sustainable plate of food will be the discussion. And we need to prove that beef can. But I'll put it to you, do you have the ability to prove it? We all believe it, there's no doubt. But policymakers are going to ask for proof. So what is the number? And how do we, because the consumer is also not buying into, at scale, broad claims. They need that number. So we need to do that better. And that's true of most of our sustainability topics as well. If I can bring it back to what a breed society, I've been asking my question about what it is potentially that stud breeders and breed societies can do. Well, firstly, you're all cattlemen as well. So the production practices that we talk about in beef production all relate to you. But also, and to Rob's point, this idea of education as a society and actually making the society a place where people can come to learn, to understand what they can do to be part of these future trends, I think is a really important role. Because Mick said it diplomatically, if we just adopted what we already knew, this discussion would be done. So the problem isn't that we don't know these things, it's that we haven't adopted it. And that's the challenge we face. So I'll pause there. I know I've just dumped a lot of information, but I do want to make sure we can have a discussion about it too. So, John, happy to take questions and share my input on any of those. I was writing answers to all the questions that went the other way as to the other guys' groups as well, but I'll let people ask me the topics.
Great. Yeah, many thanks, Ian. And look, we do have time for a quick one before we break for morning tea. I think Ian's staying around through to lunchtime?
No, just for morning tea.
Okay, right. So if you do have anything you'd like to discuss with Ian, grab him during the tea break. So is there one quick question? I think Blair's first in. So you're gunning for a game, Blair, are you?
I am going to the game. I'll be upfront with that. Thanks, Ian. Look, I think you've trod a brave path, mate, and I think it is for the right reasons. I will add that. One question I'd like you to reflect on your company, Tyson's. You've talked to the producers here of being able to know that number and back that statement up that they're reducing their carbon. You as a company, are you implementing things to reduce your carbon footprint as well? And I do need to come back to one specific part, but could you answer that part first?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of, so when we look at our carbon footprint, it breaks into basically 3 scopes. Scope 1 is the power we produce and the emissions we produce. So looking at a lot more renewable energy on site, so huge investments in solar, recapture of heat and gas in our facilities. Scope 2 is the energy we buy and the energy used by our customers, so fuel for our logistics, for example. We're looking at biofuels with the growers that grow feed for our chicken, helping them grow the biofuel that helps us transport the chicken at the end as well. A lot of processes in that circular space for Scope 2. But the big bit is Scope 3. So Scope 3 is the emissions that come in all the products we buy. It's about 85% of our emissions. Those are the emissions in the cattle we buy. So it's in those systems where we have the biggest piece to do. It's also the piece that we have the least control over. So we're already well ahead of target on our Scope 1 and 2. It's the Scope 3 that we're having to work hardest on.
I'll probably put to you there is a Scope 4. And I believe that your 47 million chickens, is that right, a week, use a lot of plastic. Plastic, and I'm not sure if everyone knows, it's actually manufactured from fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. I come down here to the city and to me, I just can't get over, go to the supermarket here and there's this small amount of food in this package. You know, when are we going to face that part as well? Because there are alternatives we can look at. But we're talking about, and as Mick said, there's a natural carbon cycle. Matter cannot be created and destroyed. It's where we're bringing fossil fuels in to actually do things. And I'd say that plastic is the scourge of the planet, really. And you know, the packaging alone from your company would be massive. And I believe maybe we don't want to talk about that out in the general population, but it's certainly something that is looming. And I believe that you're in a position to address that.
Yeah.
You're in a position to actually look at alternatives that can be game changers. And when you reflect on what you've asked these people in this room to do, go home and look what you're doing wrong, don't forget that one, please.
Well, I'll tell you what we are doing on plastics. So around 90% of our chicken that goes out a door goes without packaging, so because it's going straight to customers. and plastic is part of our scope 2, so it's working. Complete circular strategy around plastic use, so full recyclability and use of recycled plastics where we do. One of the initiatives we have here in Australia, so as I said, we move 100 tonne of beef a day. About half of that comes in 40 kilo or 32 kilo boxes. We're moving to 100% linerless. So currently, you obviously have to put a plastic liner in a cardboard box so the blood doesn't make the box. Just been working on technology that takes the plastic out of that. Big reason for us is when you're throwing trim in a box and you've got plastic liner, you throw a big bit of trim in, it pinches the plastic. When that box is frozen, the plastic gets stuck in there. We end up with contamination of blue poly. So there's a benefit to us as well. But we've already reduced our plastic by 35% globally in 3 years. We have an ambition to be 100% recyclable or not using plastic. But the challenge
really
with
good to
moving
hear.
to some of the alternatives, there's some real issues around longevity on shelf, food safety, and we have to address those to make the move. So it's a similar discussion in the medical. So where we find a lot of collaboration in that space is the medical sector.
No, it's good to see because a lot of people aren't aware it's made from fossil fuels as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Ian, for that great insight. And look, yes, let's have a round of applause. Just on the plastic packaging front, I'd just make the point that Europe is just light years ahead of most other parts of the world in this space. There is a big pushback from consumers in Europe about excessive packaging at retail, and it's going to happen everywhere. We'll see that in Australia and the United States and everywhere, but Europe's the place to look at. So we're going to have a very short smoko break because we want to try and extract maximum value out of this next session. So grab a cup of tea or coffee. We'll ring the bell as quickly as we can to get you back in here and try to keep on schedule. So see you shortly.